You can call the cops, Vanessa, I said. But before they get here, you might want to find out who actually owns the ground beneath your shoes. The smell of fresh asphalt burned the back of my throat as two patrol cars rolled through the stone entrance of Cedar Hollow Estates, red and blue lights flashing across rows of identical beige houses. Gravel cracked beneath their tires. Somewhere behind me, a sprinkler hissed over a lawn trimmed so perfectly it looked painted. Vanessa Whitmore stood in the middle of my road with one hand wrapped around her phone and the other pointing at me like she'd just caught an armed fugitive. Her white BMW X7 idled beside the curb, exhaust trembling in the cold morning air. "That's him," she shouted before the officers had even opened their doors. "He tore down HOA property and threatened our security team." I looked at the brass Cedar Hollow sign lying face down near my boots. Two bent screws still clung to it. The sign had been driven 12 feet inside my property line sometime before sunrise. I hadn't threatened anyone. I'd pulled it out of the dirt with my bare hands. Officer Daniel Ruiz stepped from the first cruiser, his radio murmuring against his shoulder. He had the tired, careful expression of a man who'd already heard 3 different versions of the truth before breakfast. "Sir, step away from the sign." I did. Slowly. Vanessa's smile sharpened. She wore cream-colored slacks, spotless white shoes, and enough perfume to cut through the tar and diesel fumes. "He doesn't live here," she said. "He has no right to be inside our gated community." "I live at the end of this road," I told Ruiz. "And I'm not in their HOA." Vanessa laughed. Not a nervous laugh. The kind people use when they believe the room already belongs to them. "Every property inside those gates belongs to Cedar Hollow," she said. "He's been told that repeatedly." My phone vibrated inside my jacket. Once. Then again. I didn't need to look to know what it was. At 8 o'clock that morning, the Knox County tax auction had opened bidding on Parcel 14A. The auction I'd spent 6 weeks preparing for. The parcel Vanessa believed the HOA owned. The parcel beneath the clubhouse, the entrance gate, the visitor parking lot, and half the road where she was standing. Ruiz held out his hand. Identification and proof of residence. I reached into my truck and pulled out a worn leather folder. My father's deed was inside, along with the 1986 plat map and a fresh survey marked with red boundary lines. Vanessa rolled her eyes before Ruiz even opened it. "Those documents are outdated. The county recorded them last month," I said. "Maps can be interpreted," she snapped. That sentence hung in the air. Ruiz looked down at the deed, then toward the red survey stake beside the ditch. His partner walked to it, crouched, and brushed asphalt dust from the stamped metal cap. My phone vibrated again. I finally looked. 11 minutes remaining. Current bid, $74,000. The number changed while I watched. 76. Someone else was bidding. Vanessa stepped closer to Ruiz. "Officer, I want him removed immediately. We have children here. He's obstructing an emergency access road. This is my private road." It became community property when Cedar Hollow improved it. The asphalt beneath us was less than 3 days old. Greg Whitmore's construction company had poured it without my permission, torn out my gravel, and buried 2 of my survey markers. The tar was still soft enough to hold the shape of Vanessa's heel. Ruiz turned another page. "Ma'am, this deed says the coal property is excluded from the association." For the first time, her smile twitched. Then it came back colder. "The HOA owns every inch inside those gates." Ruiz's body camera blinked red. "Recording." My phone showed 9 minutes. I slid it back into my pocket and looked at Vanessa. She thought the police were keeping me from fighting back. What she didn't understand was that every false word leaving her mouth was being preserved by the one camera she couldn't control. And while she stood there trying to have me arrested on my own land, the county was preparing to sell hers. "Tell me where you're watching from. And what would you do with 9 minutes left to buy the ground beneath the woman calling you a trespasser?" 6 weeks earlier, Cedar Hollow still looked peaceful from the road. That was the trick of it. From a distance, the neighborhood was all stone mailboxes, clipped hedges, and sprinkler mist catching the morning sun. Up close, you could feel the control in everything. The matching shutters, the identical porch lights, the little brass plaques telling people what color their front doors were allowed to be. My place sat beyond all of that, at the end of a narrow gravel road lined with old oaks and split-rail fencing. 6 acres, 1 weathered cabin, a steel workshop my father built by hand. No HOA dues. No architectural committee. No permission slips for living on land we already owned. My father, Robert Cole, bought the property in 1986, 9 years before Cedar Hollow existed. He kept every document in a dinted green file box beneath his workbench. Deeds, tax receipts, survey plats, handwritten notes in the margins. Dad trusted paper more than promises. A handshake tells you what a man wants, he used to say. A boundary line tells you what he can take. After he died, I left the cabin mostly untouched. I lived an hour away and rented the place to a retired teacher named Harold Mills, who treated the property better than most people treat their own children. When Harold moved closer to his daughter, I decided to come back, repair the roof, clean out the workshop, and maybe stay for good. The first sign of trouble was the missing survey stake. I found the hole beside the east ditch, clean and fresh, with red clay piled around it. The second stake was gone too. Then I saw the orange paint. A bright line sprayed across the gravel road, through the grass, and straight toward my workshop. It looked like a wound. I followed it 50 yards until I reached a new brass sign mounted on 2 black posts. Cedar Hollow Emergency Access. Authorized residents only. I stood there with my coffee cooling in my hand, listening to cicadas scream in the trees. The sign was 12 feet inside my property line. I knew because my father had taught me to read that land before I was old enough to drive. At the workshop, I opened his green file box. Dust lifted into the sunlight. The paper smelled like oil, rust, and old wood. I found the original plat folded beneath a stack of tax statements. Parcel 11C, 6.2 acres. Private access road. Not subject to Cedar Hollow covenants or any future association control. The language was underlined in my father's handwriting. Beside it sat his old brass compass, scratched along the rim from years of field work. I carried both outside. The compass needle settled. The map matched the tree line, the drainage ditch, and the stone marker near the road. The HOA sign wasn't close to the boundary. It was planted deep inside my land. Then I heard tires grinding over gravel. A white BMW X7 came around the bend too fast, trailing dust behind it. The SUV stopped beside me. Vanessa Whitmore stepped out wearing cream slacks, white shoes, and sunglasses large enough to hide half her face. She looked at the plat in my hand, then at the sign. "Mr. Cole," she said, like my name had already become paperwork. "I was hoping we could handle this cooperatively. You put a sign on my property. The community approved an emergency access route. The community doesn't own this road." Her smile barely moved. "Cedar Hollow has maintained access here for years. Driving across land doesn't make it yours." She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were pale and flat. "The expansion phase begins next month. 32 new homes. The county requires a secondary access point." There it was. Not confusion. Need. My road was the only path wide enough to connect the new development to the county highway. Without it, her project stalled. Maybe died. She handed me a folder. Inside was a proposed easement agreement offering me $5,000 for permanent use of the road. $5,000 for a strip of land worth 10 times that. $5,000 for control over the only entrance to my home. "Sign by Friday," she said. After that, things become more complicated. A breeze turned the top page of the plat. Vanessa glanced down and tapped the boundary line with one manicured finger. "Maps can be interpreted, Mr. Cole." I looked at the brass compass in my palm, then at the red clay where my father's survey stake had been pulled from the ground. "No," I said. "They can be forged. They can be ignored. But they don't move." Her smile disappeared. That night, at 2:13 in the morning, my trail camera caught headlights near the east ditch. 2 men climbed from a truck with shovels and a pry bar. One of them wore a jacket with Whitmore Construction stitched across the back. They thought darkness would hide what they were doing. They didn't know my father had taught me something else about property lines. The moment someone tries to erase one, you start recording everything. By sunrise, the 2 missing survey stakes were lying beside my workshop door. Whoever returned them had wiped off the mud but left fresh prime marks along the metal caps. That told me 2 things. First, Vanessa knew about the camera. Second, she was scared enough to undo the damage, but not scared enough to stop. I uploaded the footage to 3 separate drives, printed still frames, and called Rachel Bennett, a property attorney I'd worked with on commercial surveys. She arrived before noon in a gray sedan dusted with highway salt, carrying a legal pad and the expression of someone who hated bullies almost as much as bad paperwork. We walked the road together. Her boots crunched over the gravel while I showed her the orange paint, the sign, and the holes where the stakes had been. "Why this road?" she asked. "There's another entrance on the north side." "Too narrow," I said. "Steep grade. Fire trucks can't turn around." I pulled the county planning packet from my truck. Cedar Hollow's expansion included 32 houses pressed against a wooded ridge. The county had approved the concept, but final occupancy depended on a second emergency route. My road was the only straight connection to the highway. Rachel stopped walking. "So without your easement, they can build the houses. But they can't legally sell them." The afternoon wind carried the smell of pine sap and cold dirt. Somewhere beyond the trees, a nail gun hammered from the construction site in short bursts. 32 foundations. 32 mortgages. Millions of dollars trapped behind one unsigned line. That was when Vanessa's $5,000 offer stopped looking insulting and started looking desperate. At 3 that afternoon, her husband arrived. Greg Whitmore drove a black pickup with his company logo on the doors and chrome wheels too clean for a contractor's truck. He stepped out wearing polished work boots and a fleece vest embroidered with Whitmore Development. Vanessa followed in her BMW. They approached like they were closing a sale. Greg smiled first. "Nathan, I think this got off on the wrong foot. Your men moved my survey markers." The smile stayed, but his jaw tightened. "You have proof of that?" I held up my phone. A still frame showed his truck beside the ditch. The license plate was visible. The men weren't. Headlight glare had erased their faces. Greg leaned closer, then shrugged. "Could be anyone's truck. It's yours. Company vehicles get borrowed." Rachel stepped beside me. "Then I'm sure your dispatch records will clear that up." Vanessa's perfume reached us before her voice did. Sweet, expensive, sharp enough to sting. "This hostility is unnecessary. Cedar Hollow is offering a community partnership." She handed Rachel a revised easement agreement. $10,000 now. Permanent vehicle access, utility rights, drainage rights, construction access, and authority for the HOA to maintain the road as deemed necessary. Rachel read 2 pages, then laughed once. "This doesn't buy access. It gives you control." Vanessa looked at me. Control is such an emotional word. So is trespassing. Greg stepped forward. He had 6 inches and 50 pounds on me, but men like him mistake size for leverage. "You need to think about what happens if the county decides your workshop violates setback requirements." I looked past him toward the red line painted through my grass. "You mean the setback measured from the boundary your crew tried to move?" His face went still. Vanessa recovered first. "Friday, Mr. Cole. After that, our legal department will proceed." They turned toward their vehicles. That should have been the end of it. Instead, Greg paused beside the brass HOA sign and kicked gravel over the hole where I had pulled it out. "You're standing in the way of progress," he said. I watched his truck disappear around the bend, diesel hanging in the air. Rachel unfolded the expansion map across my hood. At the bottom, beneath layers of planning stamps, one parcel number kept appearing along the proposed route: clubhouse lot and drainage basin. 14A. It wasn't mine. It wasn't listed under Cedar Hollow either. "Who owns that?" I asked. Rachel circled the number with her pen. "That," she said, "is exactly what we're going to find out." The first violation notice arrived the next morning in a white envelope thick enough to feel expensive. Unauthorized obstruction of a designated emergency corridor. $500 per day. I read it twice at my kitchen table while the coffee went cold beside me. The paper smelled like fresh toner. Vanessa had attached a map showing my private road shaded in blue and labeled Cedar Hollow Secondary Access. My property line had been moved 23 feet east. On paper, my workshop now sat inside the subdivision. By noon, a second letter appeared. Unsafe commercial activity. Improper exterior storage. Unapproved gravel surface. They were fining me for owning the road they were trying to steal. Rachel filed formal objections with the county, the HOA attorney, and the state licensing board. Vanessa responded by moving the fight into public view. 3 nights later, I walked into the Cedar Hollow clubhouse and found almost 100 residents packed into folding chairs. The room smelled of lemon cleaner, burnt coffee, and nervous sweat. A projector screen glowed behind Vanessa. My face filled it. She had taken a photo from my company website, cropped out the surveying equipment, and placed it beside the words "public safety concern." Greg stood near the back wall with his arms folded. Vanessa tapped the microphone. Mr. Cole has chosen to block the only emergency route available to our new families. Murmurs moved through the room. She showed a computer animation of a fire truck trapped at the north entrance while houses burned behind it. The flames looked almost theatrical. The fear in the room did not. That road is private, I said. Vanessa raised one hand like a teacher silencing a difficult student. According to the current community plat, it is a shared emergency corridor. She clicked to the next slide. A survey map appeared with an official county stamp, a notary seal, and a signature from an engineering firm I recognized. My stomach tightened. The document looked real. Almost. The font on the parcel labels was newer than the rest of the map. One boundary line crossed an old creek bed the county had abandoned years ago. Someone had built a lie carefully enough to survive a quick glance. A man in the second row stood up. My daughter bought one of those new homes. Are you saying he can stop an ambulance from reaching her? Before I could answer, Vanessa leaned toward the microphone. That is exactly the risk we are facing. The room turned on me. Questions became accusations. Property values. Children. Fire safety. One woman called me selfish. Another asked why one man should be allowed to hold an entire community hostage. I could hear Greg breathing behind me, slow and satisfied. Rachel touched my arm. Don't fight the room, she whispered. Watch the paperwork. So I did. Vanessa displayed board minutes approving the access route. The meeting date was 6 months before I returned. The signature of the former HOA secretary sat at the bottom, though county records showed she had moved to Florida a year earlier. Then came a letter from Whitmore Development offering to complete the road improvements for $280,000. No competitive bids. No engineering review. Just Greg's company waiting to be paid for paving land they didn't own. Vanessa ended the presentation with a vote authorizing emergency legal action against me. Every hand, but 7 went up. Cameras from a local news station recorded the result. Outside, under the harsh white lights of the parking lot, Vanessa handed me another folder. This is your final opportunity, she said. Inside was a purchase agreement for the road. $25,000 now, but buried on page 9 was a clause forcing me to release every future claim against Cedar Hollow. You created a crisis, I said, then offered to buy the solution. Her smile returned. People believe documents, Mr. Cole, not stories. She walked away toward her BMW. As she opened the door, the top page in her folder shifted. For half a second, I saw a tax notice clipped beneath the HOA plat. Delinquent property tax. Parcel 14A. The same number Rachel had circled on my hood. I said nothing. I watched Vanessa drive away, her taillights disappearing beyond the gate. Then I called Rachel. Forget my road for a minute, I said. Find out why Cedar Hollow's president is carrying a delinquent tax notice for land she claims the HOA already owns. Vanessa's victory arrived at 6:42 on Friday morning with the hydraulic groan of a dump truck. I stepped onto the porch barefoot and smelled hot tar before I saw the crew. 6 men in reflective vests were spreading black asphalt over my gravel road while Greg Whitmore watched from the hood of his pickup, drinking coffee like he owned the sunrise. My red survey stakes were gone again. The split-rail fence lay in sections along the ditch. A yellow excavator had carved a drainage trench through the grass where my father used to park his tractor. Shut it down, I shouted. Greg lifted a folded court order above his head. Temporary emergency access injunction. The paper snapped in the cold wind. A judge had ordered both sides to preserve safe passage until the ownership dispute could be reviewed. Vanessa had translated preserve into pave, widen, and take. Rachel arrived 20 minutes later, tires spitting gravel until the new asphalt swallowed the sound. She read the order once and closed her eyes. They're abusing it, she said. But if you stop the crew physically, she'll claim you violated the injunction. So I stood there while the road my father built disappeared beneath steaming black tar. The smell pushed through the cabin windows and settled into the curtains. By noon, workers had installed stone pillars at the entrance and mounted a brass sign between them. Cedar Hollow Resident Access. Beneath it hung an electronic gate. I tested my truck's remote. Nothing. I entered the code Vanessa's office had emailed me. Access denied flashed in red. She appeared on the other side of the gate in her white BMW, lowered the window, and smiled. Residents have permanent credentials, she said. Guests must register. My house is behind that gate. Then joining the association would simplify things. The metal bars separated us by less than 3 feet, but she spoke as if she had already moved the property line with her voice. You paved my land without permission. The court authorized emergency improvements. It authorized access. Maps can be interpreted. She drove away before I could answer. That afternoon, Rachel and I sat in the county archive beneath fluorescent lights that hummed like trapped insects. Dust coated the old deed books. The room smelled of paper, mildew, and overheated wiring. We searched Parcel 14A through 3 databases and found 3 different descriptions. The current tax system listed the owner as Hollow Creek Development LLC. The Secretary of State showed that company dissolved 11 years earlier. Cedar Hollow's own financial statements treated the clubhouse and gate as association assets, but no recorded deed transferred the underlying land. Rachel pulled the original development agreement from a microfilm drawer. The pages were gray and blurred, but the language was clear. Cedar Hollow had received temporary use of Parcel 14A from the developer. Not ownership. Use depended on 3 conditions: property taxes paid annually, stormwater infrastructure maintained, and no part of the parcel pledged as collateral. We checked the tax ledger first. For years delinquent. Then the maintenance reports. The retention basin had failed 2 inspections. Finally, Rachel found a commercial loan filed by Greg's company. Parcel 14A appeared in the collateral schedule. All 3 conditions had been broken. I leaned back and listened to the microfilm machine click. Vanessa had spent weeks trying to steal my road because she needed it for 32 houses. But the gate she locked me behind, the clubhouse where she humiliated me, and the drainage system supporting the entire neighborhood stood on land her HOA had never owned. Rachel opened the county auction calendar. Parcel 14A was scheduled for a delinquent tax sale the following Tuesday at 8 in the morning. Can they fix it before then? I asked. Only if they pay the taxes and unwind the lien before the deadline. Does Vanessa know? Rachel turned the screen toward me. A certified notice had been delivered to the HOA office 3 months earlier. Vanessa had signed for it herself. That explained the paper in her folder. The threats. The forged plat. The rush to control my road. She wasn't protecting Cedar Hollow. She was trying to expand fast enough to refinance the debt before anyone discovered the ground beneath her empire was slipping away. Rachel lowered her voice. Nathan, if this parcel reaches auction, anyone can bid. Outside, rain tapped against the archive windows. I thought about the new gate, the black asphalt, and Vanessa calling me a guest on my own land. Then I looked at the auction registration form. Not anyone, I said. Me. The auction registration required a certified bank letter, 2 forms of identification, and a deposit large enough to make my stomach tighten. I spent Monday morning at the bank while rain hammered the windows and the loan officer studied my business records like he was looking for cracks in concrete. My surveying company had survived 2 recessions, 3 stolen trucks, and 1 partner who disappeared with $40,000. I had equity. I had equipment. What I didn't have was room for a mistake. Rachel sat beside me, tapping 1 finger against the leather folder containing every document we had found. Set a limit, she said, and don't cross it. I wrote the number on the back of my father's old plat map. $185,000. Enough to buy Parcel 14A if the auction stayed quiet. Not enough to destroy my company if someone tried to turn it into a war. By 4 that afternoon, my bidder account was approved. By 5, Vanessa knew. I found out because a clerk from the county tax office called Rachel to ask whether we were representing the competing purchaser. He had already spoken to Cedar Hollow's attorney. The information should never have left the office, but in towns like ours, secrets traveled faster than legal notices. At 6:18, my phone rang. Vanessa, you're confused about what you're bidding on, she said. No greeting. No fake sweetness. Am I? Parcel 14A is association property. Then why is the county selling it? Silence. Just long enough for me to hear the hum of her car engine and the faint clicking of a turn signal. Administrative error, she said. Withdraw your registration. Pay the taxes. Her voice hardened. You have no idea what you're interfering with. I know exactly where the boundary lines are. She hung up. Tuesday morning arrived cold and clear. The auction opened at 8. At 7:30, I parked near the east entrance with my laptop tethered to my phone, the bank letter beside me, and my father's brass compass resting in the cup holder. The new asphalt still looked wet under the pale light. My red survey stake had been pulled again. In its place stood another Cedar Hollow sign. Community property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. 2 private security guards waited beside it. One raised his hand as I approached. "Mr. Cole, you're prohibited from entering. My house is down that road. HOA orders." I held up the court injunction. "The order preserves access. Take it up with management." My phone showed 7:46. 14 minutes. I walked around the gate toward the ditch, staying inside my surveyed boundary. Vanessa's BMW appeared before I reached my truck. She stopped sideways across the road, blocking both lanes. Greg climbed out of the passenger side. Vanessa lowered her window and held up her phone. "Leave now, or I call the police. You're standing on my property. You are threatening residents and interfering with emergency access." Greg pointed toward the fallen brass sign. He tore it down. I looked at the sign lying in the grass. The screws were clean. The posts had been cut, not pulled. They had staged it. My phone buzzed. Auction open. Starting bid, $68,000. I placed my first bid. Vanessa watched my thumb move across the screen. Her eyes narrowed. Then she made the call. "Yes," she said loudly. "We have an aggressive trespasser destroying HOA property. He may be armed." The words hit harder than the cold. I kept both hands visible. Rachel had warned me that Vanessa might create a distraction. I hadn't expected her to turn my own land into a police scene. Sirens rose in the distance. My screen changed. 72,000. Another bidder. I raised it to 75. A patrol car swung through the gate, then another. Red and blue lights spilled across the stone pillars, the asphalt, and Vanessa's white BMW. Officer Daniel Ruiz stepped out and ordered me away from the sign. My phone kept vibrating inside my jacket. 10 minutes remaining. Vanessa moved beside him, speaking fast, feeding him her version before I could open my mouth. "He doesn't belong here. He's not part of our association." I handed Ruiz my identification and deed. "She's right about one thing," I said. "I'm not in their HOA." Vanessa smiled, certain the uniforms had tipped the balance. She didn't know Parcel 14A was already at $81,000. She didn't know Greg was bidding through a shell account Rachel had traced that morning. And she didn't know the red light blinking on Ruiz's body camera was recording every false claim she made. 8 minutes remained. Greg raised the bid again. I looked at the maximum number written on my father's map, then at the black road they had poured over his gravel. Vanessa thought she had trapped me beside a police cruiser. What she had really done was stand still long enough for the truth to catch up. Officer Ruiz held my deed beneath the flashing lights while Vanessa kept talking. Every sentence made her sound more certain. Every sentence made the red light on his body camera more valuable. "The HOA owns every inch inside those gates," she said. "He has no legal right to be here." My phone vibrated again. 6 minutes remaining. Current bid, $94,000. Greg stood near Vanessa's BMW, pretending to scroll through messages. His thumb moved every time the auction price changed. Rachel's text appeared across my screen. "Shell account confirmed. Greg is bidding." I raised the bid to $100,000. 3 seconds later, Greg answered with $105. Ruiz handed the deed to his partner. "Ma'am, county records show Mr. Cole's property is excluded from Cedar Hollow." Vanessa's smile tightened. "Those records are outdated. The deed was certified last month. Then the county made a mistake." My phone showed for minutes. Greg raised the bid again. 128,000. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. The limit written on my father's plat was 185. Enough room, but not much. Vanessa stepped closer to Ruiz. "Officer, I am formally requesting that you arrest him for destruction of association property." Ruiz looked at the clean-cut signposts, then at the sawdust still scattered beneath them. "Did you witness him cutting this down?" She hesitated. "Half a second. That was all. Our security team did." One guard looked away. The other stared at the ground. Ruiz's partner walked toward them. My screen flashed again. 146,000. Greg's jaw flexed. He knew I was still bidding. 3 minutes. I entered 162. He answered at 170. Rachel called. I put her on speaker without taking my eyes off Vanessa. "Nathan, Greg's company paid exactly $182,400 for the new gate and asphalt contract." The number landed like a wrench on concrete. HOA money. Resident money. Money spent paving my road and locking me out. My father used to say arrogant men always left their measurements behind. I typed 182,400. Greg's phone chirped. His face drained. He tried to bid again. The screen showed an error. Deposit limit exceeded. 41 seconds remained. Vanessa saw his expression and finally understood. "What did you do?" she whispered. "Nothing yet." The timer dropped. 10, 9, 8. The sirens had gone silent, but their lights kept turning across the asphalt. Red, blue, red, blue. At 0, my phone displayed a single line. Auction closed. Winning bidder, Nathan Cole. I stared at it until the letters stopped moving. Then I turned the screen toward Vanessa. "You said the HOA owned every inch inside these gates." Her eyes moved across the confirmation. "That sale isn't valid." "It was valid enough for your husband to bid against me." Greg stepped backward. Ruiz noticed. So did the body camera. Rachel reached us 10 minutes later with the preliminary certificate of sale already downloaded. She placed it beside my original deed on the hood of the patrol car. 2 pieces of paper. My 6 acres on one. Parcel 14A on the other. The second included the clubhouse, visitor lot, retention basin, entrance gate, and the asphalt beneath Vanessa's shoes. I could have ordered the gate opened. I could have threatened to close the clubhouse or charge every resident for access. I didn't. "Nobody loses access to their home," I said. "Nobody's water gets touched. Nobody pays me $1 while this is reviewed." Several residents had gathered behind the gate. They heard me. Vanessa heard them hearing me. That frightened her more than the deed. By sunset, Rachel sent the HOA a temporary access agreement. Free use for 60 days in exchange for an independent audit and Vanessa's resignation. She rejected it within 11 minutes. The next morning, Cedar Hollow filed an emergency claim declaring the auction fraudulent. Attached was a deed showing the HOA had purchased parcel 14A 9 years earlier. The signature belonged to a corporate officer who had been dead for 12. The notary stamp had been issued last month. Rachel studied the document beneath her desk lamp, then looked at me. "She just forged ownership of land you bought from the county. Can we stop her?" I asked. Rachel closed the file. "We could." Then she smiled without warmth. "But she's applying for a bank loan tomorrow using this parcel as collateral." I understood. Winning the land had exposed the lie. Letting Vanessa sign her name beneath, it would turn that lie into fraud. Rachel slid the forged deed back across the desk. "Don't interrupt her," she said. "Let her finish digging." The Founders Gala started at 7 beneath strings of white lights wrapped around the clubhouse columns. Valets moved polished SUVs across the visitor lot. Champagne glasses clicked behind open doors. A 4-piece jazz band played near the fireplace while a gold curtain covered the new brass monument Vanessa had ordered for the entrance hall. Cedar Hollow owns IT's future was engraved across the front. I arrived in work boots with dried red clay along the soles. Conversations thinned as I crossed the room. Vanessa stood near the stage in a silver dress, one hand wrapped around a microphone and the other resting on Greg's arm. Her smile held for exactly 3 seconds. "This is a private event," she said. "It's being held on my property," I answered. The room went silent except for the soft hum of the projector behind her. Rachel entered beside me carrying 2 document cases. Officer Ruiz followed with a county investigator named Thomas Hale and a woman from the bank's fraud department. Vanessa's fingers tightened around the microphone. "This is harassment." "No," Rachel said. "This is documentation." She connected her laptop to the projector. The first image filled the wall behind Vanessa, the county tax deed naming me as the legal purchaser of parcel 14A. The clubhouse lot, the gate, the parking area, the retention basin. A county recorder stepped forward and confirmed the auction, payment, and transfer. Vanessa laughed too quickly. "We already own that parcel." Rachel displayed the deed Vanessa had filed. Then she placed the original corporate records beside it. The supposed seller had died 12 years before the signature date. The notary commission had been issued only 6 weeks earlier. A murmur moved through the residence. Greg stepped away from Vanessa. The second file appeared. Officer Ruiz's body camera footage. Vanessa's voice echoed through the clubhouse speakers. "The HOA owns every inch inside those gates." Then came the security footage of Greg's truck beside my missing survey markers. The altered plat. The falsified board minutes. The emergency access contract awarded to Whitmore Development without a single competing bid. Rachel highlighted the amount, $182,400, the exact number that had defeated Greg's final auction bid. That contract was approved by the board, Vanessa snapped. A woman near the front stood up. Claire Morgan, Cedar Hollow's former bookkeeper. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. No, it wasn't. She held up a flash drive. Claire had copied the original accounting files before Vanessa fired her. The projector showed 4 years of property tax payments listed in HOA budgets, but never sent to the county. The money had moved through 2 shell vendors and landed in Greg's construction account. Residents began shouting. Vanessa pointed at Claire. She stole confidential records. Records showing theft aren't your shield, Investigator Hale said. The bank representative opened a blue folder. That morning, Vanessa and Greg had signed a loan application using Parcel 14A as collateral. They had attached the forged deed and sworn under penalty of law that Cedar Hollow held clear title. Vanessa's face changed. The practiced smile vanished. What remained looked smaller, colder, afraid. She turned toward Greg. You prepared those papers. Greg backed into a table, sending champagne glasses crashing onto the tile. You told me to sign them. The sharp sound cut through the room. Vanessa lunged for Rachel's laptop, but Ruiz stepped between them. Hale took the microphone from her hand and informed both Whitmores that they were being detained pending charges for fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and filing false instruments. As deputies led them past the entrance hall, the gold curtain slipped from the monument. The brass words gleamed beneath the lights. Cedar Hollow owns its future. Claire walked over and turned the plaque around. A contractor's invoice had been taped to the back, paid from the same missing tax fund. I could have closed the gate that night. I could have locked the clubhouse and made every resident feel what Vanessa had made me feel. Instead, I signed a temporary access agreement on the stage. No tolls, no lockouts, no interruption to drainage or emergency services. 60 days for the residents to form a new board and complete an independent audit. The applause started in the back of the room. Quiet at first, then louder. Not for revenge, for relief. Vanessa had spent years convincing Cedar Hollow that power belonged to whoever held the microphone. That night, the microphone lay on the floor beside broken glass, while the truth stood illuminated on the wall behind her. 6 months later, the first sound I heard each morning was gravel again. Not traffic, not the metallic groan of Vanessa's gate. Gravel, tires pressing into stone the way they had when my father was alive. We removed the asphalt in sections. The crew peeled it back with an excavator, lifting black slabs that cracked like old ice. Beneath them, Dad's original road was still there. Scarred, compacted, buried, but not gone. The smell of hot tar disappeared after the first rain. Pine and wet earth returned. Cedar Hollow changed more slowly. The residents voted to dissolve the old board and form the Cedar Hollow Residents Cooperative. One house, one vote. Open meetings. Public budgets. No private contracts without 3 competitive bids. Every fine required written evidence and an appeal. Every easement had to be recorded with the county. Rachel wrote the rules in language ordinary people could understand, which made them harder for dishonest people to hide behind. The audit recovered most of the missing funds through insurance claims, frozen accounts, and the sale of equipment owned by Whitmore Development. Greg accepted a plea agreement. Vanessa fought longer. She blamed the accountant, the bank, the county, her attorney, and eventually Greg. The body camera footage made that difficult. So did her signature on the forged deed. By the time the case ended, she had lost her real estate license, her position, and the house she had used to secure part of the fraudulent loan. She entered the courthouse wearing the same kind of cream-colored suit she wore the day she called the police on me. She left without the clipboard. I never celebrated that part. Watching someone fall apart is less satisfying when you see it up close. Justice is not the same thing as cruelty. It is simply the moment consequences stop missing their address. The cooperative bought Parcel 14A from me for exactly what I had paid at auction, plus the legal and survey costs. I could have demanded market value. The land under the clubhouse, gate, roads, and retention basin was worth several times more. But I had never wanted to own Cedar Hollow. I wanted Cedar Hollow to stop pretending it owned me. The sale agreement protected public access, emergency vehicles, and stormwater maintenance. It also included one sentence Rachel insisted on printing in bold. No authority shall extend beyond the boundaries recorded in the county deed. Claire Morgan became the cooperative's treasurer. Officer Ruiz attended the first open meeting in plain clothes and sat in the back beside his wife. The 7 residents who had refused to vote against me that first night helped build the new board. The woman whose daughter bought one of the unfinished homes apologized while we stood near the entrance. "Vanessa told us you wanted our houses to burn," she said. "She needed you afraid," I answered. "Fear makes bad maps look official." At my workshop, I hung the old brass Cedar Hollow plaque above the tool bench. Claire had brought it to me after the clubhouse renovation. Cedar Hollow owns IT's future still shown across the front. I flipped it over and used the flat back as a shelf for drill bits, wrenches, and cans of marking paint. Power looked smaller with grease on it. One Saturday morning, I carried my father's brass compass down to the east ditch. The red clay was soft from rain. I found the original survey hole beneath the weeds and drove a new marker into the ground. The hammer struck metal with a clean, ringing note. Once, twice, 3 times. Several Cedar Hollow residents watched from the road, but nobody spoke. They understood what the sound meant. The line had never moved. Only the lie had grown around it. I stood, wiped the mud from my gloves, and looked toward the clubhouse roof beyond the trees. Vanessa had called the police because I said I wasn't part of her HOA. Minutes later, I bought the land beneath the empire she had built. But the best part wasn't owning it. The best part was giving it back to people who finally understood the difference between community and control. My father used to say a boundary line tells you what a man can take. He was right. It also tells you where he has to stop. Justice did not arrive with shouting or sirens. It came through a survey stake, a recorded deed, and a clock counting down. Smart, patient, inevitable.